Hey, hey, Blue Table fans. It's mail time. Mail time. Here's the mail. It never fails. It makes me want to wag my tail. When it comes, I want to wail. Nobody? Mail! Come on. Don't pretend you don't know what I'm talking about. Okay, this is from Alan, who is attending the London Business School MBA class of 2012. Ooh, he's fancy. So, here you go. There's apparently 5 main questions. It says, what in your view are the key differences between the tabletop wargaming industry today relative to 10 years ago? Well, 10 years ago was 2001, and I actually had a game shop in Oregon round about this time, and I'd say the big difference was that there was actually a sense like maybe Games Workshop wasn't the top competitor. And because right now it is kind of like they're just, you know, to catch up to them, you know, Hubble telescope, you know, you can't, it's so far away to possibly match that market presence that other companies really, just in terms of infrastructure and technology was the big one. Back then, I remember in White Dwarf, they showed kind of their 3-up laser tracer thing. And now, apparently, GW is just doing all this really complicated aluminum mold type stuff just in-house. And you have to have really quite a setup to do that. And the next biggest company, as far as I know, is Privateer Press. They only have like 50 people. They're literally maybe 1/20th the size of Games Workshop. So you really have like this huge whale now with, like, you know, the little remoras and barnacles and other fish kind of just toting along with it. But 10 years ago, it wasn't that sense. It was, in fact, in the late 90s, I kind of got sick of my Games Workshop rep one day, and I told him, guess what, pal? I just discontinued Games Workshop, and I got rid of all of it. And I brought on Chronopia. Yeah, Target Games was the next up-and-coming thing, and I was going to make them successful. So thanks a lot for screwing it up, Target Games. Yeah, well, and back then it was a little more helter-skelter. Now there's more of an independent sort of substructure. Like you have Adepticon being run independently, and you know, and that's a big thing to have all these people coming together. So it's possible to build a company on that. So that would be a difference. That it's a little bit easier now to break in, I think, because there's a sense of Games Workshop built that foundation of tournaments, and they formed the concept in people's minds of how things would work, and that is really a powerful influence. So 10 years ago, that's what it was, kind of like the Wild West. It really could have been anybody's game, but I think at least in the mid-90s, still could have been anybody's game, but these younger companies basically screwed it up, in my opinion. They just, I don't know how it is. It wasn't that they had less imagination. I mean, at the time, roughly the quality was kind of all the same. You know, like if you look at Warzone, the Mutant Chronicles, they put out a miniatures battles game back then, and the quality of their models wasn't really notably less than Games Workshop was. So GW is, when you talk miniatures battles, GW is kind of like the elephant in the room, you know. So there's that, and people were casting them in metal. Now it's kind of like plastic. There was a time when it was like plastic. It was like, you're making stuff out of plastic? Are you kidding me? So that's another difference, is that back then it was metals were kind of the thing, and that was considered the higher quality. And in fact, if you read Games Workshop's annual report from last year, they talk about Finecast, and I was expecting them to say it, but they didn't say it, which was metal costs a lot. And I think countries devaluing the currency has had kind of a shockwave down through precious and semi-precious metals. You know, that they all went up, right on down to probably tin and copper and all the things that metal figures are made out of. And so companies that were geared up and ready to go plastic, they did well. And that's what I have to say about the next question, is plastic is the future. So let's move on. What, in your view, will be the key differences between the tabletop wargaming industry today and in 10 years? What will be the biggest surprise relative to the consensus view, if any, in the year 2000? In the year 2000? Nobody? Oh man, that brings back great memories. What? Thank you. Jeez. All right. I'm sorry, what? Are you mocking me? You're not better than me, Sarah. I watch television enough for both of us. That's right. Okay, so in 10 years, first off, plastics is the future. Secondly, here's my big surprise that I think is going to happen. I got a couple. Rapid prototyping machines are going to reduce in cost so that entrants into the market will be able to acquire them and effectively sculpt figures using 3D programming. And you might think, well, that's kind of how it is now. No, I mean, it's going to become cheap. It's going to be like computers, personal computers. They're going to have 3D printers. They're going to get better, and and smaller companies are going to be able to do the infrastructure type things that Games Workshop's doing. You know, I don't have a sprue, but I'd hold it up and say, you know, smaller companies are going to be able to produce stuff like that, like GW does currently. So, you know, I'm not fixated on Games Workshop necessarily, but you can't ignore them either. My other prediction has to do with a trend generally, which is stuff right now is copyrighted. So somebody creates something and they put a copyright on it, and they say, you know what, our intellectual property is the valuable thing, and if you want to use it, then you owe us something because we're giving something to you. And I think in the next 10 years, I think this is already happening, it's going to switch around, which is, I created something, but the privilege is for me to have you look at it. So you're going to have more open licenses, and so anyway, predictions will be that market share will change in that, like, so here, let's say here's the amount of gross sales on the net for miniatures battles, tabletop miniatures battles games, and you got to include ancillary services too, and accessories. So, and right now I think that's about 250 to 300 million a year worldwide. Could be wrong on that. I'm not counting historicals, by the way, which is another huge market. All right, maybe I am more important. So, so what's going to happen is the market's going to grow, but if Games Workshop is 90% of the market right now, they're not going to be 90% of the future market. It's going to be more like, I'm going to say 40 to 60%. And how that's going to happen is emerging players are going to become smarter, more prevalent, more competitive, and the groundwork that Games Workshop themselves laid will also lay it for other companies, i.e. the tournament structure. And I predict that a cabal of young companies who are the promoters will emerge, and they will have a say-so on the winners and losers in the market. The only problem is that with that possibly happening is that Games Workshop, actually, in fact, is this the next thing? Oh yeah, in fact, I'm going to leave that for the next question. So anyway, that's how I think it'll look in 10 years, is I think that it'll be a golden age of miniatures battles. Right now, we're just getting started. It seems like we've arrived, but that is not the case. It's still an emerging market, what I call the big swimming pool theory. I won't get into that right now, but it is. It's a growth industry, I think that's what they call it. See, I don't know what things are called. That's the difference between me and somebody that went to college. Wait a minute, I went to college. So anyway, went to college and learned something. Let's go with that. Okay, imagine, here's number 3. Imagine that your family's entire net worth was invested today into GW shares. And you're being sent to a desert island for a decade. Oh, serves me right. Unable to sell any of the position or see a stock quote in that time. If you had the opportunity to have a conversation with the CEO before you left, what would you say to him? I'd say, listen, pal, I want my $2 back. So I'm going to call flawed question on this one because it assumes I have a net worth. Seriously though? No, I think I do have assets now. So, well, let's assume I do, just for the sake of argument. Come on, just play along. And really, this is like, what would you advise GW to do? I think the big mistake Games Workshop is making is that they're clamming up. They're trying to batten down the hatches on their intellectual property, their market share, and I don't think that's the way people are going to view it in the future. I think we're entering the age of internet piracy, and we're entering an age of sort of intellectual glasnost that I think companies like Wizards of the Coast, by doing the D20 system and creating an open license, they basically just mass infected the entire disparate market with their product. And I think Games Workshop, in a way, is creating a generic system. They're kind of a victim of their own success, meaning everyone knows the rules for this one game, and it becomes sort of a common ground. Like if you move to a new city and what if they don't play the game that you play? Well, that's why this market tends towards consolidation, because everyone has to speak the same language. Same thing with computers. You don't have a scenario where, out of 20 different computers, 10 different operating systems are being used. You have just a very few. And I think miniatures battles is the same way, especially because of the investment that you have to make. If you're going to spend $600 on figures and $1,400 worth of paint and man hours, or hiring professionals to paint your figures, you don't want to, find out that all of a sudden people have lost interest in this game. There needs to be a support. And that's what's happening to Games Workshop, and why, for example, the Chapter House lawsuit is so important, is that there's a zillion little subsidiary companies providing for the demand created by this one monolithic game system. And so my advice to Games Workshop would be more open. License things, do an open game license, and then your immortality will be assured. If not, then pursue the other course, and these young upstarts are going to come along, and they're going to start beating at the gates, and they will crack that dominant market share. It's going to happen unless Games Workshop opens up. Right now, I don't think corporate culture is going to allow that. And I believe that the old culture of gaming companies being formed by people as a work of heart, I think those people that are doing it as a work of heart are also going to start combining that with a lick of business sense, which is why I think Privateer Press has been so successful, and they are going to start becoming players in this market. What else? They're already doing the plastics thing, which is just an ad like the Finecast. Fantastic move, because now, no matter what happens to the market for metals, for tin, antimony, nickel, or whatever it is, they'll be safe from that because they're using a different type of substance. And I predict eventually you won't even have fine cast. You'll just have plastic kits. And you already see that. You see that in the little blisters they just put out. There's like, pop, 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 pop. You know, here's all these heroes just on little plastic sprues. And fantastic quality for those too. But watch out, because the technology is going to become less and less expensive and more refined, and that's going to allow new players to enter in and actually be competitive. What's really lacking now is imagination. I think that most companies coming out haven't really had the sort of, I don't know, the spark, the scale. What's lacking is pageantry. That's why it always comes back to Games Workshop, because I want to make a giant army. A company that says, hey, you only need 5 models to play. I don't want to play with just 5 models. I want to make something that's like converted amazingly, that, you know, that has 200 guys and is like kind of this grand scale type of thing. And that's why I think companies like Weird Miniatures, or what's the name of it? Oh, I can't remember. It's like 2 guys in their garage are making kind of this futuristic sort of thing. Gear? Can't remember what it's called. So anyway, but my point is, so those smaller companies are kind of keeping it small. I don't know, it just seems like they're kind of limiting themselves. And I think the way to go about it, if you're starting a new miniatures battles company, would be to go big. All right, so there you go. That's what I'd say to the CEO. If you were to set up, here's number 4. Number 4, if you were to set up a tabletop wargaming business today designed to go head-to-head with Mantics, GWs, and privateer presses, etc. of the world, what would be your strategy? Why? Wow, I actually kind of already started in on that. Well, first off, we are probably going to do this in the next year to 2 years. You got to take it seriously. You got to have business sense. You got to have a long-term plan, and you've got to go big, which is meaning the scale of the models that you make. You have to make big stuff. I actually think a company like it's pretty low tech to do what Forge World is doing, where you're making. Granted, the models are sculpted really well, but to actually cast them, that is low tech. And quite frankly, I think a company that followed Forge World's model and did like bigger things would be successful. And also, you need duality. I think Confrontation was a great example of this, meaning there was a game, but there was also a the models were actually so cool that you could just buy them. Like, they were gorgeous. Like, we have the old Confrontation, what was it called, magazine. God, what is it called? Anyway, just for like coffee table reading, for inspiration. It's that good. The problem is Rackham didn't have kind of the business sense to go along with that. So, like, it kills me every time a contender comes on the scene and they just can't see it through. And so my recommendation there would be go big with scale, go big with the pageantry and sort of feel of the game, go big on the game background, you know, galaxies or whatever it is, and one strategy is to make it, and this goes back to the thing of, well, now there's kind of a core system and people are going to draw models from lots of different places just to use that system. It's going to, like Games Workshops, like Warhammer is going to be the generic system. So a strategy for success is to just make your models, make your own game, but make your models compatible with them, which is kind of what we see with Mantic. I think the mistake Mantic has made is the scale of their figures. Their figures are actually a little bit smaller. If anything, the trend has been to make things bigger and bigger. Like if you look at old Grenadier figures, they're tiny. They're pathetic. You know, and that's been the scale. In fact, hold on, I'm going to show you something. So here's some old figures from, I think it is Grenadier. And so here's a beholder. And I think nope, there's not even the tentacles in it. That's it. And now here's how big they're making them nowadays. See the difference? And in fact, this is a homebrew one we did. Wizards of the Coast made one even bigger. Oh, and by the way, this is a very rare figure. There's only 3 in existence, and this is one of them. Gorgeously painted, I might add. And so, yeah, that's what you need to do. Okay. Yeah, and to be open. I think if you put your rule books up online, if you just gave in, because all the codexes are pirated, there's PDFs of them floating around the day after they come out, sometimes weeks before, and I think embracing that is really the way to go. You would, it's kind of like a monkey with the hand in the jar, you know, that the monkey sticks its hand in, but because it's balled in a fist, can't get it out. But like mentally, you got to get past those types of problems, kind of think your way around things, and I think that's the problem with the idea of corporate, consolidation or corporate secrecy. Okay, 5th question. In your view, what will be the impact of the 2 Hobbit movies on tabletop wargaming industry in the short term and long term? How will this differ from the impact of the Lord of the Rings movies? I'm going to have to pass on this one. Other than to say Lord of the Rings is really kind of where fantasy has come from, and I think Games Workshop made a wrong move getting into that. They would have been better off doing their core lines, or even creating a 3rd branch. But see, I'm in America, so who knows, maybe Lord of the Rings is huger over in England. So I don't have anything bad to say about it. I love Lord of the Rings. I was in 5th grade when I think I was reading them for the 2nd time, and I was fascinated. And in fact, I remember reading Lord of the Rings yet again when I was 19 years old and in the break room of the video store. I think I was about that age. So they definitely have an influence, but really I think the future of miniatures battles lay with creating new things that maybe draw on old archetypes but really are themselves new. Oh, and that's the other thing, is that when we do our own game, even though I said a good piece of advice would be to make it compatible with existing larger systems, I don't think that's what we're going to do. I want to make something completely different that is truly our own idea, and as much as that's ever possible, to not copy what someone else has done or draw inspiration from something. All right, well, that's all I have to say about that. And so I hope you all enjoyed, and Alan, I hope you got what you needed out of this. Yay! At last it's over.